Hey, it's Josiah. After wrapping up our month-long focus on fascism, I wanted to turn back to some current events. The war with Iran has been coming up frequently on the show, and I know it's something on the forefront of a lot of our minds right now. So I thought it would be good to do an episode looking at the war over the past few weeks, what it means for the region and for American hegemony. As usual with this type of current events episode, I wanted to talk to someone much more knowledgeable than me on the subject matter. So today I am joined by writer and commentator Al-Sheikh, who you might know as Emissary of Night or Diplomat of Night on Blue Sky or Twitter. They were really insightful here, and I hope you enjoy the episode. But before we get going, I do need to say that you can support this show on Patreon. For a mere $3 a month, you get access to a whole back catalog of exclusive episodes, as well as at least 2 new ones each month. You also get access to the Fruitless Discord, as well as the occasional deleted scene from a main feed episode. If you're not quite ready to support the show financially, that's alright. Consider just leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps out with the algorithm, and I might read your review at the top of an episode. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's get on with the episode. You are listening to Fruitless, a podcast hosted by me, Josiah Sutton. This is episode 84, Destabilizer, featuring Al-Sheikh, where we talk about the war with Iran and the destabilization of the Middle East. Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of Fruitless. I am joined today by Al-Sheikh. You may know them primarily as Emissary of Night or Diplomat of Night on Blue Sky and Twitter. Hello, Al-Sheikh.
Hi, Josiah. How are you doing?
Doing well. Considering the circumstances and the subject matter we're about to discuss.
Absolutely. Before
we get too deep into that, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself in your work or whatever?
Yes. So, hello, everyone. I am Al-Sheikh. I go by Layla or Yassine, depending on the day. Okay. I'm a Palestinian American, and I am a writer, commentator, poster, if you will, if you follow me on Blue Sky, all sorts of things. I do comms work about Palestinian and U.S. relations, and I typically write about the history of the Palestinian struggle. And so I'm happy to be here. Mm-hmm.
Well, today I'm kind of bringing you on to talk about the war with Iran, which will, of course, lead into conversations about the Palestinian struggle as well. Because, a lot of what's taking place right now is it's a regional war. It's the regional war that we saw coming, I think, since a couple of years ago, at least, is kind of arriving now, it feels like. And so before we get into the nitty gritty of what's taking place right now, I kind of want to ask just sort of big picture dumb guy questions to kind of fill us in on our context here. So what's the U.S.'s deal with Iran? Why does the U.S. really hate Iran?
This is of course, I don't think this is a dumb guy question at all. I think it's a perfectly reasonable question, especially since, in essence, this is a war of aggression. We did it for virtually no immediate reason. There was no threat to American citizens. There was not even really a threat to Israel, if that's one of the things that you care about as an American citizen. This was a war predicated on a couple of fundamentally assumed truths in American foreign policy, and especially in Israeli foreign policy, about the IRI, which is the Islamic Republic. This is a government system that came into place in 1979 after the Iranian Revolution. Mm-hmm. It's a government that juxtaposes itself against Israel. It juxtaposes itself against American expansionism, the position of hegemony that the U.S. has traditionally enjoyed in the region since the 1960s. There are reasons for that, going back to the 1950s, about American interference in Iranian politics. Many of you may know about the coup d'etat that was attempted and successfully done in the 1950s that deposed a popular prime minister at the time. But since the 70s, since the tail end of the 70s, the U.S. and Iran have had a adversarial relationship not an inherently adversarial relationship. There have been times at which it's fluctuated. During the 80s, there was a fluctuation as a result of the Iraq-Iran war. During the 2000s, as part of the global war on terror that the Bush administration launched, Iran was a bit more conciliatory. But going into the 2010s and beyond, there was a sort of aberration, I would want to say, I've come around to saying about the Obama administration. The Obama administration took a look at the region and said, we can't maintain the status quo that we've had forever, in a sense. We need to not necessarily upend it, but recalibrate it in a way that makes it easier to maintain. And one of the ways that they thought of doing that was by signing the Joint Comprehensive Plan, which was a nuclear deal, in essence. It made sense for the U.S. to ease financial constraints on Iran in exchange for Iran's agreement to not pursue nuclear weapons or to not go beyond a particular threshold. This agreement was sort of a don't do stupid shit thesis for the Americans. Instead of doing Iraq II, or instead of further torpedoing our influence in the region, we decided to not do a stupid thing. And then naturally we elected Donald Trump. And we immediately did. Yep. We immediately did some stupid shit. We tore up the agreement. The Iranians saw this as a legitimization of the belief that the Americans aren't reliable, aren't true to their word. And since then, we've sort of been in an escalatory spiral. I don't want to say war is inevitable or ever is inevitable. There's always ways to avoid it. We could have elected Harris. Trump could have had better negotiators than Witkoff and Rubio. Trump simply could have told Israel no and could have told the Gulf no. But in a sense, it's become almost inevitable since 2023 that we would be in this escalatory spiral. The region is now, it's no longer possible to maintain that pre-2023 status quo. And so now these are powers that have to confront each other. There has to be a new status quo. And it looks like we're about to get it if this ceasefire holds.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, I think, we're dancing around 2023 there. I mean, that's the big moment. A lot of stuff shifts in the Middle East, which is, of course, after the October 7th attacks and then the subsequent invasion of Gaza and, attempted extermination of the Palestinian people in Gaza. What is what's the broader impact that that's had on the region overall? Obviously it's devastating for Gaza, but what has it meant for those outside of Israel and Palestine? Why has this become a rallying point?
Yes, I'll answer. I'll sort of provide a background before I answer it more directly. Okay. But the logic behind October, there's multiple things that led into the logic of October 7th. But one of them from the perspective of Hamas and one of them from the perspective of the Palestinian rejectionists, those who didn't align with the 1990s negotiation track, was that Palestine as a political issue was being put on the back burner on a permanent basis in the 2020s. With the signing of the Abraham Accords, with both Democrat and Republican in the United States sort of slowly agreeing that this is an internal issue for the Israelis, that they can manage it indefinitely and they can do whatever they please with it. This sort of thing was a motivating factor for upending that arrangement. These groups looked at the consolidation of the Gulf states and the Israelis. They looked at the gradual pacification of the Palestinian struggle and of the Lebanese and so on, and said, we have to do something about it no matter the cost or the risks. And of course, we've seen what happened since then. Gaza has been pummeled. Genocide took place. South Lebanon has been pummeled. Entire villages are gone. Southwestern Syria has been seized in part. Parcels of that land have been taken by the Israelis in a preemptive invasion after the fall of al-Assad. And now we sort of see a new dichotomy being taken up in which there is an expansionist and aggressive Israel, which already existed prior, but now it's no longer the Palestinians which are restricted to this. There's multiple other states which now feel threatened. And on the flip side, you have an Iran which built up its axis of resistance that has been largely set back, though not defeated. Hezbollah was set back significantly in 2024, but not pacified. Al-Assad was overthrown due to his myriad incompetencies and cruelties. Really only Ansarullah in Yemen have been, the Houthis as most people call them, have managed to remain as strong as they've been. And 2023, I think I I hesitate to say it definitively because you can't, as things are happening in real time, you can't conclude
Right.
what is going on.
It's
But
hard
I would
to
say
make
that
historical statements about current events. Yeah.
yes.
Mhm.
But if one were to say that 2020 or even 2014 to 2023 was an era in which the US was now trying to sort of conclude its arrangements in the region, because you've heard about like the pivoting to Asia obsession that people have. They want to focus on Taiwan, they want to focus on East Asia, shore up support there, focus on other things. If that was the era in which that was really what was going to be done, the idea was to give Israel and the UAE and the Saudis and the Qataris and all these groups the ability to police the region on America's behalf. If that is what you take from it, which is what I take from it, then that theory has collapsed and now we're in for a free-for-all. We don't know what's going to happen now, but that's essentially what's happened. This theory is discredited. The Iranians have decided to go all in. The Israelis have decided to go all in. And there we are. Now we're in the new struggle to see what will happen next.
Yeah, a sort of a regional Cold War has now officially gone hot, it feels like. In a way that it's interesting that it felt like it was going to go hot a number of times and then didn't until now, because one thing I think is notable is a lot of this escalation, begins in 2023, but I especially associate it with, the 12-day war last year, right? That was last year. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's difficult to keep track.
It's really, things have been moving very fast. So, I mean, last year, this was when we started hearing about how Iran is about to have a nuke, kind of the same shit we've been hearing, for decades. It seemed like that was the moment regional war was going to break out, and then it didn't. I guess, do you have a reading on why it didn't? Why wasn't that the moment that this happened?
I think there are a couple of reasons. I think one is that at the time, that 12-day conflagration, which I don't like the name 12-day war, but, I actually consider it all, conceptually, I kind of consider it all one big war since 2023. But that's a topic for another day. In actual reality, the hot phases. Yeah. Being a bit of a pedant because of the historian in me. But one of the main reasons is neither side was really prepared for it. After those 12 days, most of the Israeli defensive capabilities were depleted. They needed to shore them up. If the Iranians kept it up, then they would have been punching holes more often, which is what they were doing just last week. They were capable of punching holes into Israel's Iron Dome and Arrow systems on a much easier basis after about a month of warfare. Another reason is that the Iranians needed to prepare. Yemen wasn't as involved. The Iranians didn't want to take all of the options available to them that they took this time around. And also the war wasn't quite existential for the Iranians at the time. There was no stated goal of decapitating the regime. There was no stated goal of purposefully making it so that the protesters could rise up again. I think the calculus changed with the protests in January and February. And I think also the calculus changed for Trump in that he is in a sort, this is speculative, but I think he's in a sort of legacy defining moment. He wants to reshape things. He was high off of the Venezuela raid, which was illegal. And he was high off of his ability to bully and cajole and terrorize Europe over Greenland. And now he thought, let's reshape the Middle East. Let's do what Carter couldn't, what Reagan couldn't, what Bush couldn't, what Clinton couldn't, what nobody could. And obviously that failed. Here we are, with the Iranian regime still intact, with Hezbollah still intact even. And so I think it's a compounding set of factors. I also think the fact that Palestine is not at the forefront here plays a role, because the Iranians, the Lebanese, the Yemenis, and so on, they wanted to see that theater closed. And it's not really closed at the moment, but they wanted to see it closed so that they could focus on their own preparation. And so they were better prepared this time after the so-called ceasefire was put in place.
Okay. That I think is really helpful. So they weren't ready for it in the same way they are now. So a lot of the preparations seem like they came after the, again, the 12-day war, if we're calling it that.
Yes. The Americans weren't ready. I think also, I'll say this, a lot of people I've seen online and even in public discourse have been confused as to why Trump didn't intervene in January, right at the height of the protests. Well, the reason is literally it wasn't possible. The U.S. didn't have the assets in place, the military assets. They weren't prepared for it. They had always thought that they were going to go later in the year. A lot of people had speculated that the war would have actually started, according to the reporting, a lot of people in the administration were thinking that they would do this in April, but they went sooner, partly as a result of Netanyahu's pushing for it, partly as a result of the Gulf not really objecting once it became clear that they were going to do it no matter what. And so the Americans were prepared. They were just prepared at a kind of comically absurd time. They did it at a point at which the protesters were no longer really an equation.
Right. It seems like they were moving all their assets there while the protests were happening, and then by the time you could actually launch it, the protests weren't happening anymore. Could you say a little bit about the protests for those kind of ignorant about it? Why were the protests happening, and I guess what do the protests represent for the direction that maybe, I don't want to speak in generals for like the Iranian people, but in general, what are the demands of the protests, if there are those, and why did the U.S. feel like that was an opportunity to strike?
I think I also cannot speak too much. I'm not Iranian and it's not my portfolio per se, but I think if you were to speak in the broadest terms possible, there was a legitimacy crisis at the heart of the state over the economic crisis and over the inability of the Iranian government to address the crippling sanctions, to address the shortfall in water production, to address the failures of the government to consolidate after the 12-day conflict last year. I also think people have long felt that the expenditures abroad on things like the access have exacerbated people's frustrations, and attempts at reform have been stopped at various different turns. And so there are people who will look at what happened and say this was an inorganic protest movement, or that there was not a legitimate crisis. And I don't think that's true. I do think people overstate in the other direction that this was about completely upending the regional dynamic, because a lot of people will say, in turn, well, Iranians want to be friends with the United States, or Iranians want to be friends with Israel. And there are certainly some who do, especially in the diaspora and in the external opposition. But if that were the case then, it's certainly not the case now. And I think, unfortunately, I do think it's just a matter of the Iranian government having succeeded in stopgapping the protesters' demands.
Well, and I mean, if one of the issues for the protesters is the spending on the axis of resistance or whatever, I mean, what the U.S. has done right here is just completely validate the regime's concerns.
Yes, and especially on the sanctions issue. A lot of people, I think something that I find weird, and I've discussed this with a few people before, is a lot of people get really defensive if you say out loud what defenders of a superpower say out loud. And what I mean by that is, like, take, for example, like Ukraine. A lot of people who are deferential towards the Russian narrative will say, oh, well, you can't say Putin just wants to destroy Ukrainian identity. But then you can just pull it up and he says that right outright. And likewise, a lot of people say, oh, you can't say that the sanctions are meant to punish the average Iranian into protesting against the regime. But that's what a lot of these American proponents of the sanctions say out loud. They were saying that in February. They were saying that the sanctions had succeeded in compelling protests to occur, in propelling a legitimacy crisis. And so from the cynical perspective of an Iranian state loyalist, or from an Iranian who even just maybe doesn't feel particularly strong either way, you can see these Americans who are saying, we made it harder for the average Iranian so that they would do the work for us. And that's a problem. That's a legitimization of what the Iranian government says, which is they're punishing you because they don't like me.
Right.
Why are they punishing you? You haven't done anything. And so it's not a shock at all that the Iranians want sanctions relief as a part of this deal. I don't really think they're going to get it, but the right to demand it.
Well, and I think this is helpful to bring up in light of, one of the big pieces of propaganda on the American side of this war has been emphasizing the crowds of people in Iran chanting death to America, right? This is something that's come up a couple times on Fruitless the last month or so, that it's kind of funny for Americans to be so baffled by that. Obviously, I guess it's upsetting to hear somebody say death to your country regardless. But like, I don't know. I think if you look at what we've done to Iran, it makes sense that sentiment would be there.
Yes, I think it's How did I put it before a couple of days ago? It's something like if your posture as an American diplomat or as an American statesperson is to go towards a country, and this is a state also, this is something that I think a lot of people don't quite understand. The main difference between the Iranians and us, the Palestinians, is that the Iranians have a state. They have a missile program. They have an army. They have an intelligence service. They have all these things. But if you go to a state and you say, heads I win, tails you lose, please flip the coin, and they flip it, they keep flipping it, and they lose because that's the arrangement you made, they're going to start flipping it, and they're going to shoot at you at some point. You cannot, maintaining hegemony isn't just about projecting force. Maintaining hegemony is about projecting legitimacy, and legitimacy requires public buy-in, and you can't have public buy-in in this region if your proposition is that you suffer all the time in exchange for nothing. And that's more or less what our thesis of government has been since we've torn up the Joint Comprehensive Plan. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Where would you, maybe place on a timeline where the U.S. really started to enter a crisis of legitimacy in the Middle East? I mean, there's a degree it's always had that, but
it's always been
okay.
Iraq. Yes, Iraq. In recent days, you might have seen I say this is stupid Suez. In reality, Iraq was our Suez. This is where we completely smashed our reason of being and our maybe even our ability to think comprehensively and reasonably about the region. It was a strategic victory, easily. I mean, we got rid of Saddam, but since then, we've never had a real theory of mind about the region beyond maintaining Israel's qualitative military edge and maintaining the Gulf as an island of stability. All these other pockets of the region, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, even like Iraq itself, the place that we invaded. If they squalor, if they suffer, it's sort of just not our problem. But that's not how borders work. These things diffuse into each other. And so we've created a pockets of stability and let everybody else deal with it until we have to deal with it. Yeah. So easily it's Iraq. And since then, we've never been, our ability to comprehend the Palestinian issue has gone down, even as the public has changed their opinion. Our ability to look at, say, Yemen has never been very comprehensive. Just in general, we've become less capable. It's not even necessary. It is ideological to some degree, but it's not even just that. It's our structural ability to address these crises has become so neutered.
I think that's a really good point. Well, and I guess a follow up to that is why Iraq and not Afghanistan? Did the invasion of Afghanistan seem more legitimate to those in the Middle East?
Oh yeah, I think I can't necessarily speak to the public opinion on that. I don't know the polling, but it is much more straightforward. I mean, the Islamists who were responsible for 9/11 had safe harbor by the government of Afghanistan at that time. Sorry. And we asked for them back, and they said no. And we said that's a casus belli. You may think plenty of people will disagree, plenty of people will agree, but there was a straightforward chain of logic there. With Iraq, the stated reason for being there was a lie. And all of the subsequent actions taken were further crises, whether it was the torturing of innocent Arabs across the region, whether it was the inability to see that there would be an insurgency, or even just parachuting random 20 to 35-year-old Americans into the green zone to govern millions of people. And they don't speak Arabic. They don't understand Sunni. They don't understand Shiite. They don't understand Christian Arabs. This was going to be a disaster. And it was in large part a confirmation of what people had already felt and of course I feel this way because I'm Palestinian, but a lot of Arabs feel this way because Palestine is an Arab issue. It's a regional issue. It was a confirmation of how people felt because they had looked at what we've done, which is safeguard a few states at the expense of many. And then we went in and we smashed up one of the biggest Arab states and left it in pieces. And now we're trying to do that here, or we tried to do that here, and we didn't succeed.
Yeah, I think that's notable because one of the things I found really striking at the beginning of the war with Iran, actually breaking out at the end of February, was the Iraqis storming the embassy. It seems like a lot of people don't just see this as a war against Iran, but as, an American and Israeli war against the region.
Yes, I think I sometimes mix these up, and I apologize if someone ends up looking it up and I mistook which think tank did it. But I think it's the Arab Center in Doha. They do polling on the region, and they consistently poll the Arab world. And last year, I believe, and the year prior, and I would wager, can't say for certain, but you viewers can go back and look. I would wager in years prior, the Americans consistently top the list as the most important threat to stability in the region, according to Arab public opinion. And some people will say, oh, well, why not Israel? I think you've seen the debates before about which one is the dog and which one is the tail, right? Which one is controlling the other. From the Arab perspective, most people, and I think this is the correct view to clarify, it's the Americans. The Americans are the superpower. The Americans provide the weapons. The Americans have the diplomatic capital. They're the veto at the UN. They're the economic superpower. Everything. This wouldn't have been a war in the first place if the Americans didn't greenlight it. The Israelis can't sustain a war against Iran without the Americans. And you see now, people will say, oh, well, Trump can't prevent Netanyahu from continuing to demolish Lebanon. But I don't think that's true, first of all. And second of all, he hasn't attacked Iran since then, or he hasn't done it consistently since the so-called ceasefire a couple of days ago. And the reason for that is because they can't. They can't sustain that. So this is an American war. It is, of course, also an Israeli war. They bear the same portion of blame, I think, insofar as this is the ideological justification. This is the incentive. But of course, so that's why they storm the American embassies. That's why Bahrainis cheer when they see missiles hit American bases. These bases are unpopular in Bahrain. They're unpopular across the region. And so, yeah, a lot of people view this as a threat to the stability of the region, because it is.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think I remember you sharing that statistic about how most Arabs feel about the U.S. being the single thing causing destabilization in the region. I found that really stunning because, like, I know that logically, but I guess I didn't realize how much empirical weight there was actually behind those numbers.
Well, I mean, I think also, I apologize for cutting you off. I think another thing that people struggle with is that this is America's regional order, so to speak, you know. It's an order that was designed in large part to insulate Israel, to make it less penetrable in terms of consequence or in terms of military threat or in terms of anything. But it is still America's regional order, like Egypt, Israel, Jordan, the Gulf states. You know, these are states that are all American aligned. These are authoritarian states. They're powerful enough, with the sole exception of Israel, these are states powerful enough to suppress their own citizenry, but not necessarily powerful enough to go around and bully everybody else. That's the arrangement that America likes. And this is the arrangement that benefits American strategic interests insofar as they're defined. And so the average Arab will look at that and say, this is America's regional system. The war is for America's regional system. But the irony is that this war is destroying it. And the irony also is that Israel, which is the largest beneficiary of that system, is also helping destroy it. I think that's the irrational part of the war.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of American citizens struggle with that because I think on some level we have all digested, Cold War propaganda and war on terror propaganda, and I think I struggle to realize to what extent, like, if you look back on the history of the Cold War and the war on terror, the U.S. has always been significantly more friendly to authoritarian regimes. It prefers that because it maintains, the order that it wants in a given region. But I think there's still like this assumption that, we're this I don't know, champion of democracy globally, or I don't know, the cop that keeps democracy in check or something. And,
yes, I mean, I think I've had the privilege of writing something that I hope will be released at some point later the year about this, but something that stuck with me, and for the viewers, I'm 24, and so a lot of my the first years where I really started thinking about the way, and I'm also a Palestinian American, so there's that duality there, the way that our state as an American citizen interacts with my region from which I'm from is the 2011, 2012 years, the Arab Spring years. And I remember how we turned our backs on Bahrainis, for example.
Yep.
The Saudis went in and suppressed the Bahraini revolt. The Bahrainis have never recovered from that. Democratic backsliding has happened since then. The Americans turned their backs on the Egyptians after the military coup d'etat. Wouldn't even call it a coup. These are formative moments. I don't think it's like axiomatic that the U.S. has to be friendlier to authoritarian regimes. These are just the choices that America has made. Like, it benefits them. It makes it easier to promote normalization with Israel. It, to the American mind, makes it easier to police anti-American sentiment in the region. Makes it easier to keep American bases. It makes it easier to keep selling American weapons. These are things that benefit the United States, I suppose. But it comes at the actual expense of stability because you don't really have the legitimacy. There isn't really a basis of popular legitimacy. You can't just maintain hegemony forever because a handful of military generals in Cairo and the worst royal families on the planet in the Gulf love you. That's not legitimacy.
Well, I guess getting into the war proper now here. So the strikes began on the 28th of February. And I mean, immediately it seemed like the war aim was regime change. That was the plan, which, you know, was different than in the past where it had been like, oh, this is about the nuclear threat or whatever. You know, the 12-day war was kind of justified under that pretense.
Yes.
But this was a decapitation strike, and I think you were right to point out earlier that it's kind of like the U.S. was high on the kidnapping of Maduro. You know, that they think they could just kind of do this. They could just, you know, get rid of a leader and then everything will fall into place. Venezuela went a little too smoothly, I think. That's part of, I think, it was, you know, flagrantly illegal and all that, but it went too smoothly for the US. I think that they learned some bad lessons from it, some incorrect lessons.
Yes, 100%. I think something that maybe people struggle with, especially on the blue side, is that you can't really make a descriptive statement without people thinking this is a prescriptive statement, that you're saying that a certain thing should happen.
Yeah.
But
I tense up whenever I say something like that. Yeah, for that reason.
But like Americans, and this is true for anybody. I mean, this is it's not just an American thing. I think that's maybe a part of it. A lot of people think, oh, you're just reflexively anti-American. But when you punch people in the face and they don't respond, the only lesson you're going to take is that you can just keep punching people in the face. That's a human reaction. It was true for Russia. It's true for China. It's true for the United States. It's true for Israel. If you just keep doing it and nobody responds, then your logical assumption will be that you can just keep doing it. And we did it in Venezuela. And there was no real pushback from Europe, for example. Nobody did anything. They said this was bad. But now, hopefully, Venezuela can have democracy.
Yeah,
that's what.
Yeah, how's that
going? and so, like, you know, they clear their throat and they move on. Everybody clears their throat and moves on. And Trump was left with what essentially amounts to a victory. So, of course, yes, he was high on that. The Israelis went to him and said, "If we do this, the protesters will rise up. The regime will collapse." They said these in definitive terms, according to the New York Times. And so he thought this was his chance. And, well, it wasn't.
It wasn't. I mean, we're talking about the bad timing, too. I do think it's also notable that they began the strike at the beginning of Ramadan, right? I mean, I think there's a degree that it feels like the timing of the strikes were just designed to turn anyone against it. Like there was no carrot. You know what I mean? It was all stick. There's no reason anyone in the Middle East broadly would support this war, it feels like.
I think this is maybe not really a response, but I remember it had to be an Emirati commentator. Or no, it wasn't an Emirati. It was an American. It was Mark Dovowitz of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He said something akin to of like, I just realized it's Ramadan, which first of all, you just realized it? It was 2 weeks into the war. It was 2 weeks into Ramadan. And it was like, I just realized it was Ramadan. And so the Islamic Republic of Iran is attacking brotherly Muslim nations during Ramadan. And this is all, I guess, all well and good. Good for you that you can look at a calendar, but like, he's not stupid, and nobody's stupid. These are states that have American bases on them. And these bases were being used. It's now been confirmed multiple times that Kuwait, Bahrain, I'm sure, though I don't know if there's been definitive confirmation, but if it's true in Kuwait and Iran, then it's almost, well, Bahrain, can't speak anymore. Then it was certainly true in the UAE. These are states where the US are using territory to launch attacks during Ramadan. So, you know, so much for brotherly Muslim nations, so much for the sisterly Republic of Qatar, the sisterly Republic of Bahrain, or Kingdom of Bahrain. I don't know what I'm saying. You know, so yes, I agree though. Like the indifference to Muslim opinion, to Arab opinion, to Iranian opinion, I think is, and I struggle with this as well. I think, to my mind, these are cynical talking points. Like, we attack and they rise up. Like, I don't think many people actually believe that.
Yeah.
But I'm sure some in the administration did, and I'm sure some in the Israeli government did. Certainly, like, Netanyahu was told repeatedly by his own general staff and by his own intelligence services that this wouldn't happen. But he still sold this opinion to the United States. On some level, I think these people did think this would happen. Yeah. Which is absurd.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But yeah, I agree with you that I think that a lot of the time this stuff is being said cynically because this administration, what I think makes Trump different from a lot of previous American, administrations, doing this kind of shit is that the Trump administration has a tendency to just say the quiet part out loud a lot. So like after Venezuela, he's immediately talking about oil. And then yet again, I mean, the rotating, war aims throughout this whole conflict has been ridiculous. Cause initially, yeah, it's regime change. It's we're bringing democracy or monarchy, but to, some sort of non-Islamic, non-religious government into power in Iran, supposedly. And then, within a few weeks, we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about oil. I mean, that's what this is about, right? I mean, maybe not fully, because I don't want to get in.
He's so erratic that you never even really know what he's actually focusing on. But yes, of course.
But oil is a huge component of this, and I think that previous administrations were better at not talking about that.
Yes, I think it's so that's a big part of it too. I was in a discussion before getting on here. It was like, why is public opinion about Israel changing so much in the United States? And there are a lot of reasons. I think first and foremost, it's always been the main driver is Israel's own behavior. As it steadily gets worse, Americans respond. That's an easy cause and effect. But an underrated reason is that defenses for Israel, discursively, in the American discourse are just worse. People don't use the same pretenses anymore. Like there's no longer only democracy in the Middle East, no partner for peace, every billions must smile. Nobody's saying any of this anymore. It's actually Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are little babies. And you can't say they represent the government. They only control the finance ministry and the defense ministry. Those aren't major. Chill out. Actually, when Netanyahu said that he kills the family members of Iranian leaders, that was a mistranslation. He didn't say that, or actually he meant it and is good. These are not good defenses. And when Trump says it's actually about the oil, it's about the oil. That's what he says.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I also think the advances in kind of just media tech in the last couple decades have played a big role in this too, because I mean, the Gaza genocide is, I don't know this specifically, but I've heard it claimed it's the most well-documented genocide in human history, because of the videos and the images that have been able to just come out. And I think that does play a pretty massive role in tanking public opinion in the U.S. Toward Israel, because I mean we can see what's happening on our phones. It feels like a live streamed genocide.
Yes, 100%. I think, I think in the case of Iran, it's pretty similar. I mean, these are lo and behold, Iranians have smartphones, and lo and behold, they have access to the internet when the internet is not shut down, and so. We can see videos of entire apartment blocks being demolished, or we can see videos of the pharmaceutical plant that was attacked.
Or the oil refinery that in Tehran. That was, I mean, some of the images from that were horrifying, seeing the burning oil in the streets and the rain that came afterwards that was colored black from all the oil. I mean,
yes, I mean, I think I don't want to give Americans too much credit, or anybody really too much credit, but I think to a lot of people, and maybe it's not even like a pure morally good reaction, but a lot of people will see this and say, well, the average person doesn't deserve this. They will think my apartment block shouldn't be blown up just because there's some ostensible, nominal military target within a 5-mile radius, or they'll, or maybe even just a little more cynically, they'll think, well, why are my tax dollars being used for this? I mean, my healthcare was cut last year. My ACA subsidies are gone. And so now billions are being used to bomb a school in Iran.
Right.
Why? What gain am I going? And now, as a result, my oil prices, my gas prices are up. It doesn't even do the claim that this produces a better life for Americans doesn't even hold up.
No, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm one of the things I do for money is I drive DoorDash, right? And so the war is going to directly impact my ability to do that. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, I have plenty of friends who, on a varying degree of scale, are engaged in knowing about the political circumstances in the world. But all of them who drive uniformly are like, why? Why did we do this for basically no reason? There really is no good reason that we've done this. I mean, And it is kind of funny that we spent years being like, Biden doesn't have a oil prices go down button or whatever. But Trump literally did have an oil prices go up button, and he pressed it. and so here we are. And in the process, we've possibly destroyed the principle of free maritime navigation. So prices may be up permanently.
Yeah, there is long-term ramifications of what's happening here that I don't like. You can't put this genie back in the bottle. You know, like this is it. We're here. Like even 100%. If the war just ends tomorrow for, you know, some magical reason, it's just done. The ramifications are crazy. I mean, in the US, we haven't even fully hit feeling like the Strait of Hormuz closing. Like we haven't felt the ramifications fully yet. Cause we still have, you know, cause ships take a long time, to arrive. And I think it's like the middle of this month is going to be when the last, oil deliveries make it.
I think so. And I think the big thing that I think about a lot here is when people are like, well, the war could begin again in 2 weeks. And I think that's definitely true. But a problem now for the United States and for Israel and for everybody else, it does become more difficult just as a pure logistical matter to restart a war. Even just a temporary cessation makes it more difficult. Not impossible, but more difficult. So the escalation ladder is now in Iran's hands because they know that Americans don't really have the appetite for a land operation. Like we also haven't really felt the ramifications of dozens of Americans die or dozens of soldiers are caught. If Trump were to do that, his legitimacy in the United States would plummet as well. And it's already, I believe it's 34, 35 below that in public approval. And that's worse than Bush was at in like 06 or 07. I don't really recall very well, but
it's pretty bad. I mean, I had a stat I did want to read that I think is notable when we're talking about public opinion here, because I got this from G. Elliott Morris over at Strength in Numbers. But around the beginning of the war, he had compared the opinion polling about the strikes on Iran with the support for the invasion of Iraq and the invasion of Afghanistan, and those numbers were jaw dropping to me. I didn't realize how little support there was for this war. So yeah, 2001, the invasion of Afghanistan, there was a 92% approval rating. The invasion of Iraq, it was 72% approval rating. And the invasion of Iran right now is 34% at the start of the war.
And that's largely just because, if I understand it right, that's largely just because Republicans sort of have a cult-like affirmation of whatever he does.
If you break it down by by political party, it's even crazier because it's 69% of Republicans support it, but 10% of Democrats support it.
Yes,
which is in comparison to 59% of Democrats for Iraq and 90% for Afghanistan. So like, I mean, we're talking about, mass disapproval of this. And I guess I'm curious why the Trump administration doesn't feel like that's a problem.
I think part of it is Trump is unique. I mean, as an Arab, I sometimes feel the need to push back. And I don't think Trump can be extricated from the broader trend line of what America's done in the region. But there is a uniqueness to Trump in that he really does not give a shit about anything at all. Like it's almost a superpower for him, that he does not care. But yeah, I think American government responsiveness has gone down greatly over the years in terms of these issues. Maybe part of it's difficult to know why. Maybe a part of it is that social media has maybe dampened some of the more immediate things. Now that we're also hyper political, maybe each thing actually matters less overall, in the day by day, and so the effects are only felt on a longer time scale. That might be one thing, but I do think most of it is they just don't care, and maybe they will care in November because it looks pretty bad for them in November. I think you already see some effects of this on the lower end of the political ladder. Like look at the polling and the results in places like Illinois, for example, where AIPAC-backed candidates did not do very well in Democratic primaries whatsoever. This trounced fine. The AIPAC-backed candidate didn't win in the Senate primary. I'm blanking on her name. AIPAC polls at negative 33% favorables in Texas among Democratic voters, according to the latest poll. Like these are things that do have impacts now, and they will have impacts later. And maybe they just don't care because it doesn't let them right now. I have a feeling JD Vance cares because you've seen all these pieces where he is claiming to have been against all of this all along. I don't believe that.
No, I don't.
But no, he's definitely going to be running in 2028 on the I had nothing to do with it. I tried to stop it. I'm just a baby. Me and Usher, we were going to mass every week. All these things about how he had nothing to do with it. I don't know. So, but yeah, the lack of responsiveness is bizarre. It really is.
It really is. I mean, yeah, I it's kind of a separate conversation to get into about whether America is still a democracy or not. But I would put this as a piece of evidence toward the maybe not.
Definitely not on foreign affairs. I think definitively, this is a non-democratic process. There is a blob, but even more than that, there's just a deferentialism that exists to the executive, and Congress has abdicated itself. Informed citizens have largely abdicated, partly because of fatigue, partly because they know that he won't listen. But yeah, I think the vast majority don't want this, and it just doesn't matter. That's also true in Europe, though. I mean, I guess maybe this is a broader global issue now. The vast majority in Europe want something different to occur, but because of the paralysis of the European Union and because of the feeling that they can't challenge the U.S., not much is done.
Yeah, I that's an interesting point because I don't know to what extent. I don't know my European politics in the same way as a American here, but with America, I would say part of this is this bloated executive branch that Congress has like you said been deferential to. And, the slow kind of, erosion of constitutional governance at its most basic level, that Congress is supposed to control military funding and stuff like that. And we're seeing Trump is eroding that consistently. To what extent is that, the case in Europe too? Is it the bloated executive or is there something else going on?
In Europe, I think it's partly, I hope that this is still just an aberration, which is terrifying to me that people can think this after he got reelected. Definitively, it's not an aberration if he comes back after 4 years. But partly it's that. I think partly it's still that American power projection is American power projection. The largest component of NATO, the most important anchor in the security guarantees of the continent, and so on. I think partly also is just the EU can't respond to events very well the way it's structured. I think Germany, for example, also has an ideological commitment that it still holds on to in relation to Israel. I think Starmer is indecisive. That's probably one of the most galling examples, though. For the UK, there is a clear public constituency that's upset about the trajectory of where things are going. And largely it's just been, please, Donald, stop. I will do nothing in the interim, though.
We need to be very reasonable.
It's only been the Spanish, I think. It's only been them, the Italians to some degree, the Belgians to some degree, the Slovenians. But these are smaller European. Italy's not that small. Italy's one of the, I think, the more major ones. But these are smaller powers. And France makes a big talk about Lebanon and about the push for Palestinian statehood, but they don't implement the more tangible measures. It's I think, I don't really know. It's frustrating as an American anyway to look at what's going on there.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you're saying Europe is kind of weak-willed in this and not really willing to stand up to the U.S. But also Trump seems to see them as opponents right now. He's consistently threatening to withdraw from NATO and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's kind of, I kind of don't know where it's going to go because if Trump keeps pissing them off, maybe eventually they do to pull out. I don't know.
I would hope so. I think the thing that I keep my eyes on mainly is on whether or not the EU will ever suspend its trade association agreement with Israel. It's much likelier now than it used to be, but because of the EU's way of structuring, you need a qualified majority or you even need a unanimous majority, depending on how it's brought up to a vote. And these are states like Germany and Hungary who will never accede to anything like that. As of now, Hungary may yet get rid of Orban, which would be a beautiful.
That would be beautiful.
Would be a beautiful rebuke of him, of Trump, of Putin, of Netanyahu. But maybe this is a segue into something else, but I still think it's important to be hopeful. I think again, this is a descriptive thing. I don't necessarily think it's a prescriptive thing because it's bad that we got here in the first place. But it does feel good that Trump can't impose his will the way that he wants to. This failed. This was a failure. And I think on the whole, that's pretty good, at least insofar as it relates to us and how we can get rid of him or prevent it the next time.
Well, and so another thing I think is kind of related to this is we're seeing a lot of people on the right defecting kind of on this subject.
Sure.
I guess what do you make of that? I mean, I don't trust the people on the right necessarily for doing this because a lot of it comes from strange and anti-Semitic
yes, I think,
positions. But yeah,
I think you're right to some degree. I think there will be continued debate about this. I think, and I've debated it with a couple of my colleagues, a couple of people who keep track of this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. There is definitely a legitimacy crisis on the right, especially among the broader right-wing public. Like the polling that just came out and from Pew, Republicans under the age of 50, the gap between Democrats under the age of 50 and Republicans under the age of 50 when it comes to views of Israel has closed significantly. There used to be a massive gap, and now there's not. Republicans have shifted a lot on this, younger ones. Mm-hmm. But why that's the case? Of course, there's definitely latent anti-Semitism, which is more or less just the flip of the coin of philo-Semitism, which is what they already had, the weird parasocial relationship to Jews, and now they flipped the narrative towards like this is their fault. I think that's a big part of it. I think also there's just a broad undercurrent of why are we doing this for Israel? Like why do we do any of this for Israel when they don't really do anything for us? That's a big feeling that people have. But I don't know. I go back and forth. I don't know if this will ever really translate into a real rupture in Republican politics, because the main difference to me, from my perspective, and this might just be because I'm left-wing and I'm optimistic about my block. So maybe I have the rose-colored glasses. But if you looked at the Democratic Party's narrative in 2023 and 2024, the base sort of rebelled against the leadership on this issue, on Palestine and Israel. That's never really happened with Republicans. At least I've never seen it. Right. Like there's an active level of rebellion that will happen and is happening with Democrats that we've not yet seen. Like there's not going to be from my perspective, there's not going to be who are the constituent blocks of the Republican Party? Churches, really conservative labor unions, like a handful of the 5 that exist, gun groups, all these groups. What groups on the right are going to do what the UAW did, for example, or what black churches did on Palestine, for example? I don't see it happening. For now, it's just Tucker Carlson and Jill Kent. They have podcasts. Right. That's cool, I guess. I mean, it's cool, I guess, that Tucker Carlson is being extremely weird and hateful, but in a different way than Trump is weird and hateful. But does that translate into a Republican constituency group saying no more weapons to Israel? I don't really think so. Maybe it does, but I don't think so.
No. In a lot of ways, I feel like it's setting up for a narrative to try to weasel our way out of the U.S. being at fault for this war, because
yes, I think so. 100%.
You emphasized earlier that really this is America's war, but if we could frame it as Israel's war, if we could frame it as the Jews' war, then we can clear our conscience and say we got fooled by our ally or something like that. So in a lot of ways, it feels like it's laying the groundwork for the right to have some sort of landing pad after this.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really strange to me is, and this is true sort of across the spectrum, and this is where I have a little bit of cynicism, and I'm not as optimistic, but I think America has a sort of bad habit of acknowledging that something happened, but not drawing the lessons from it. And so even if you were to say that the U.S. got duped, which is wrong, the U.S. did not get duped into doing this. Even if you do say that, will there be the follow-up of what do we do to not prevent that again on the right? And I don't think there will. I think there's a decent chance of that being the case on the left, like insofar as we've spent the last 40 years underwriting the security guarantees for Israel in the Gulf. And what did it result in? Us doing more war on their behalf. That's not a good arrangement anymore. We should change. I think there's a decent chance of that. With Republicans, I think there's still a strong chance that they will just do it all over again, because they did do it all over again. They did Iraq, and then we did this. So what's to say they won't?
Yeah, I like your point there of acknowledging it, but not learning from it, because I do think that in the lead up to Iraq, it's like we're not going to allow another Vietnam, and then we kind of just had another Vietnam. And then with Iran, I mean, this was the same thing where it's like we're not going to allow this to be another Iraq. And I guess it hasn't yet, but it feels an awful lot like, a war of aggression that is deeply unpopular. And, we keep doing things that rhyme with previous wars But just go into it saying this won't be like last time. Like we acknowledge
this time it'll be different.
This, no, it didn't work for them, but maybe it'll work for us.
It might work for us. And I think and this is where I don't think I've touched on it very much. Well, I touched on it a little bit, but I think this is where I really do hope. And I think in 2028, there will be more substantive discussion of this. But I hope that on the left, we can at least acknowledge that Trump in 2020 set up a security arrangement that interconnected Israel and the Gulf on the premise that you don't have to solve the Palestinian issue and that you don't really have to solve any political issue. You can just sell these groups a shit ton of weapons. You can sign an F-35 jet deal and give Israel more THAAD units and JDAMs and all these things. And the region will just be quiet. Like that was the assumption that Trump made. That was the assumption that Biden also made. Like there are ways in which Biden and Trump diverged. Seriously, there are, especially domestically. But in the Middle East, Biden largely affirmed the logic of these Abraham Accords, and it failed. I mean, it failed in 2023. That was the death knell of it. Biden unfortunately doubled down on the idea that Saudi and Israel normalization would be the way of untying the Gordian knot, so to speak. But it didn't work. Trump also doubled down on it. It didn't work. At a certain point, trying all this shit again and again isn't logical. So, let's just jettison it, do something new, or go back to something old that worked a little bit better at least. I just don't see that happening on the right. Like, I don't think Tucker Carlson's going to run in 2028 on we should establish a Palestinian state or we should protect Lebanese sovereignty or whatever. Most likely he'll just say we should leave, which could be an improvement, but doesn't really address it. It doesn't really address the crisis that we've created.
Yeah, I mean that just feels like it would just lead to kind of the, I don't know, Syriafication of the whole region. If we can't get some sort of normalized, we can't. We're too deep in. But that makes sense. I think the right, I don't think the right is actually serious about decreasing militarism or whatever. They are just, some of them are just able to detect the winds of change and in public opinion are trying to follow it.
Yes, I think so. I think it's all kind of a misdirection. I think sort of. There's a little bit of misdirection.
Well, I guess let's now talk just about the ceasefire that's underway now. So that we had a really tense day on, was it Tuesday? I think it was, last Tuesday, when Trump, over Easter weekend and leading into that Tuesday was, posting with an increasing amount of genocidal energy. It was, the rhetoric was getting increasingly radical. And, on Tuesday, that was the day that started off with Trump saying that, this was going to be the end of a civilization, which felt particularly existential in its framing. And so, we were all, I think, kind of waiting with each coming hour for is this going to happen tonight? Is a nuclear weapon going to be deployed? Is something like that going to take place? And then it kind of just fizzled into a ceasefire. What do you think happened? We're obviously a little too close to fully understand, but what was going on that day?
I really can't tell you. I think to me, this has happened many times insofar as Trump has threatened some obscene criminal acts. He did this repeatedly with Gaza and with Hamas. He said, we'll send you to the Stone Age, or maybe not of that is that term, but it was we'll bring down force on you that we've never seen before. He even threatened direct U.S. airstrikes, which hadn't happened yet and still hasn't. And then it just don't happen. And I think part of it is that he thinks this works as a negotiation tactic. That might be a little sane washing. He's obviously demented and he's lost his marbles and this is racist and all these things. But also there is probably a degree to which he thinks this works, which it doesn't. It never worked with Hamas, and I very much doubt that it worked with Iran. Part of it also is, I think, in that interim period between that a whole civilization racist drivel was posted and the actual ceasefire, the Pakistanis reiterated the same framework they had already had. And I think the thing that confuses me about it all is that the strait is still closed effectively, and the strait will remain effectively closed for a while now. And I can't square on my end, the claim that the ceasefire has achieved what hasn't been achieved. Like he's saying that the strait will be open now, but it won't. So I really don't know what the logic here is. And part of me is fearful that this is just buying time and that we will resume all of this again. Mm-hmm. But it all just sort of defies logic. And I mean, that's been his whole presidency and it's been his whole political career. But I don't really know. And I'm curious what you think, though.
I think that I do kind of feel like things will resume in 2 weeks. I hope that isn't the case, of course. I think Trump's rhetoric around this right now is, saying that we've won this exchange or whatever. I agree with you that I think if we're going to sane wash a little bit, that the genocidal rhetoric was an attempt at negotiating. But I think now him saying, we've won, the Strait of Hormuz is good or whatever. I mean, I think he's just playing the market. Yeah. I mean, there was kind of this repeated thing throughout the war that like right around market Sunday opening night. Time. Yeah, Sunday night, he'd be like, we got peace talks going. It's all good. It's fine.
I think, with the Barack Ravid stories at Axios and the leaks to like the Financial Times and all of these, it's so bizarre that we live in like the gambler presidency or whatever this is, where we have to keep the market up and the market will dictate the war's progression or pause or ending even. It's so there's so many ways in which this is truly incomprehensible to me. And I think I'm curious to really see if the people who insist that we can go back to normal after all this still believe it after this, because I don't really think it's possible. I mean, it's certainly not going to be possible with the strait, and it's certainly not going to be possible with the region, but I really don't know if it's possible for us to, like, after this presidency, be like, everything's chill. This will never happen again.
Especially when there was like barely any justification for going into the war in the first place. When you do wars of aggression, the takeaway from everyone else is, this asshole does wars of aggression. That for no reason you might get attacked by them at any point. Yes. And you can't really undo that once you've done that.
And also, like, I don't want to say definitively, but like if you're Iran, the only real conclusion here is you own the strait now and you get nukes. Like that's the only line of thinking. And easier said than done on the second part, but the previous supreme leader who hated nukes is gone. So
yeah, I mean, if we are to believe that the intent of this conflict with Iran over the past few decades has been about preventing nuclear weapons, this was the worst thing. We made a case for nuclear weapons to the Iranian public. Like, this is why you need a nuke. Yeah,
I mean, we didn't invade North Korea, so I mean, I don't really know what people It's so, and again, prescriptive, descriptive, but like I've said before on Blue Sky, if you're Iran, hell, if you're Saudi or if you're Turkey, you want nuclear weapons outside of the NATO umbrella. If you're Saudi, you want nuclear weapons. If you're, it's, and I do think, this is bad of me because I am from Texas, and so I sort of forget which Castro it is, but whichever Castro is still in the House, he did that thing in a foreign affairs committee where he asked one of our ambassadors, does Israel have nuclear weapons? And they wouldn't answer. And, I think another big part of why this war has such little legitimacy among left of center people is we went to war to prevent a state from getting nuclear weapons on behalf of a state that has nuclear weapons against a treaty that we claim should be the law. So it's also farcical. It's also ridiculous.
One other thing that's coming to mind too is what do you make of Pakistan and all of this? Because the ceasefire was the ball seemed to get rolling because Pakistan's prime minister made a statement on Twitter, on X, and then I don't know. I was also baffled by, I think it was Ryan Grimm had observed that there was like an edit history on it that was really strange. I don't know. Have you see much of that?
I haven't seen much about the edit history. But I do think one of the reasons Pakistan was involved so much, without being able to speak too much about internal logic for Pakistan, is that the Gulf states are their entire thesis has been shot through. That they're ostensibly neutral and that they're the Switzerlands of the Middle East. Like these aren't true. Switzerland. Imagine how can one be a Switzerland in the Middle East if you host U.S. army bases.
Right, yeah.
If you host a U.S. aircraft carrier. And how can you hold mediation talks if you have a U.S. Navy port there? Like, how are these things reconcilable? And they're not. And so there's a reason why the talks weren't held in Doha, and there's a reason why they weren't held in Muscat, despite the fact that Oman remains mostly cordial with Iran. So I had always thought it would either be Ankara or it would be Islamabad. So it's not too surprising to me that Pakistan did it. So,
yeah. The Ryan Grimm thing he had identified is that the original post said like it looked like they copy and pasted something directly into the tweet. So it started with draft Pakistan's PM's statement or something like that. Which is, I don't know what to make of that. You know, you can take that in a more conspiratorial way and say that was a draft they were handed by someone and they published it hastily, you know, kind of carelessly or whatever without editing it. Or I don't know, some comms person didn't delete something. I don't know.
Yes. I think also it's to say nothing about how we got here is so bizarre, but what is really interesting is that now, if these ceasefire talks actually go through, if we do see talks on Sunday, and if we do see this ceasefire hold for more than 2 weeks, the big win for Iran is that the talks will be formed around the basis of the Iranian proposal. Like, that's a massive, significant diplomatic victory. It's no longer like we've gone from unconditional surrender to maybe sanctions are lifted to some degree. Maybe we release certain funds that we've already frozen again. Maybe they just keep the Strait forever. Maybe they charge forever. Even if the war resumes, we've lost so much leverage. And so it'll be hard to see how the war actually resumes. I still feel in my bones that it will, but it's hard to see it. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Well, I guess, do you have any final things you want to say before we get wrapped up here?
I think I go back and forth about this, and I think maybe if I have to flip it to coming back on, maybe we could discuss it more in detail for this. But I come back to, and I'm biased, like I said, I'm Palestinian, but I come back to this often. I think if we actually want to ever have, as Americans, a stable, a logical relationship to the region, it requires jettisoning this idea that the region doesn't have political needs. Like we've torpedoed our way through Iraq. We've stumbled our way through Iran. We've ignored the Palestinian issue. We brushed off Syria. We bombed Yemen for no reason. I remember when Biden was asked, "Is the bombing of the Houthis working?" And he said, "No, but we're going to keep doing it." That's almost a verbatim quote. Yeah, I think that's an easy way to sum it up. Like, we just do things that we know don't work. We do it often. There are different degrees of that, different flavors of that, different orientations of that. Like, I can't sit and say Trump is not distinct in his own way, but we've done this for a long time. That's the problem. And in order to not do it anymore, the next president and hopefully the next set of Congress people need to look at it and say, well, our assumptions, like, Palestine's not a political issue. That's been proven untrue. Lebanon's not a political issue. That's been proven untrue. Iran doesn't have fundamental demands that we have to contend with. We can just power project our way through every issue. That's been proven untrue. If we're going to see our ways through this, it sounds almost comical to say, but we really need to just get back to first bases like Jimmy Carter had and think about a bilateral, multilateral framework. And we need to think about resolving these things diplomatically. Like, it's so basic to say it. It sounds almost absurd.
Yeah, but give peace a chance, but literally, actually.
Yes, literally. And that can't be done by just underwriting. I have a piece that I hope will be out later in the year about it, but I think we just can't underwrite this absurd. The war on terror has failed. We can't do the security framework anymore. We have to have a political framework. And so that's sort of what I'm left with after all of this. We need to address the actual political conditions that have caused all of this to happen. We can't just rage all day like we have. We need to actually address it. It won't happen under this administration, though. So, we have some time to think about
how we're going to do that. Yeah.
Yes, how we're going to do it ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the most important things to take away from this is while Trump is in some sense an aberration, he's an aberration in his brazenness, not in necessarily what's happening. It's he says the quiet part out loud, but this is a situation that has been the result of several decades, and a lot of Democratic presidents are just as much to blame for the situation we're in as Republican ones. And so any direction forward requires us actually rethinking our foreign policy entirely and not just returning to the Biden administration.
Yes, to dovetail, I think this is the perfect way to dovetail it, to tie it all up. I think, and it's not even necessarily, everyone's the same, because I know people will really get upset at you if you say that. And I don't think it's true either. I don't think it's true that every president's the same. But the constant that I've experienced and that I've based on the history is Republicans ratchet everything super far to the right. And this is especially true on the foreign policy issue. We break norms. Republicans break the norms to such a degree that it's incomprehensible. And Democrats sort of just kind of walk past it. And there was one aberration on this, and it was Obama, and it was the Joint Comprehensive Plan. And I still think this is the biggest sin that he's ever made in the eyes of Washington, D.C. The Joint Comprehensive Plan did exactly what Washington said they wanted, which is no nuclear Iran, and they never forgave him, and here we are. That's a real problem. Obama achieved a stated goal of the United States, and everyone got mad. I think that says a lot about what type of country we are.
Yeah. Well, I guess, is there anything you want to plug here as we're wrapping up? Where can people find your work, all that?
I am published in The Nation and the Center for International Policy. This is not my work, but I do recommend that people read Ripple Currents. I recommend that people watch Al Jazeera, France 24. Please stop watching CNN. Dana Bash can't explain the war to you. Jake Tapper can't explain the war to you. Read the Financial Times, all those sorts of things. And you can find me on Blue Sky at diplomatofnight.com. And I hope that the next time I talk to y'all, we have solved the Middle East crisis.
It's all going to be good. Yeah. If you want to come back and talk about a movie or something chill next time, that sounds great.
Only good things can happen, Josiah. Only good things can happen. Billions must smile, and we will smile. And yes, we'll talk about Lawrence of Arabia or something.
That sounds awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps out with the algorithm. And if you really like what you heard, consider supporting the show on Patreon. And one of the benefits of supporting this show on Patreon is that you get your name read out at the end of every episode. So, without further ado, this episode was brought to you by our lovely patrons, who include, I am once again Philip Cozy, I drink corn syrup, yum, Vita Breva, Avakai Brodagam, Caleb Sutton, Regular Size Horse, parentheses small, Kyle Gannis, Moss, The Worst of All Possible Worlds, Stephen A.K. Spike Stonehand, Gavin Aronson, Joseph Gross, Robert Alman, Attention Francis, Shy, Randy Sutton, Josh Christensen, Caleb Butler, Alex, Frankie Teardrop, Martha Zumak, Benjamin Rawls, Ian Friedenberg, Ian S., James Lunt, A. Ron, Grouchius Marxius, Ruthus Truthus, Electron Shed, Jacob Dallas, Kitty Sparks, Alan, Dr. Shockmaster, Lord Zed, Ellie, Evan Jones, Nathan Thiessen, and of course, Chris Barker. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and I will see you later this month.